Hi, it's me. Now, I'm not usually too interested in 28mm lenses. I don't find it an especially exciting focal length, but ever since the optic you see before you was announced, I've wanted to try it out just because I love its style, the Nikon Z 28mm f2.8. It is deliberately styled, as you can see, to look like one of Nikon's old manual focus lenses from the 1980s, although thankfully it's actually a modern autofocus lens. It's a kit lens option for the equally awesome retro-looking Nikon ZFC camera, and as you can see, both camera and lens blend together in lovely harmony. The Nikon ZFC camera only has a smaller sized aps-c or DX sensor, so this lens will behave like a 42mm lens on it, giving a very useful standard field of view, neither wide angle nor telephoto, although that maximum aperture of f2.8 is not very bright for a prime lens. Interestingly though, despite being obviously designed with the Nikon ZFC in mind, this is actually a full frame camera lens, so you can get a lovely wide image with it when using it on one of Nikon's full frame cameras. Here it is on my Nikon Z7, where it also happens to look pretty natty. If you're buying the lens on its own, then it costs a slightly expensive $300 or an even more expensive £310 in the UK. If you buy it as part of a kit with the Nikon ZFC though, then it's only $250, and also Nikon have just released a version with a non-retro plain design which costs about $40 less. I'd like to thank Nikon UK for loaning me this lens for a couple of weeks for testing, although as usual this is a totally independent review. And a quick reminder, this lens is only for Nikon Z system mirrorless cameras and not their digital SLR cameras. Okay, let's start by looking at the build quality. The lens is made with a lot of plastic, even down to the lens mount, which I know a lot of people do not appreciate. There's no weather sealing to it either. Apart from that though, it actually feels quite nice and solid, not to mention looking fabulous. The only control point is the lens's rubberized manual focus ring, which turns incredibly smoothly and responds very well with the lens's focus motor. The lens exhibits only a small amount of focus breathing, as you can see here. The lens's autofocus motor doesn't exactly have a difficult job considering the wide angle and only average maximum aperture here, but it does perform quickly, accurately and silently. Nice. And, well, honestly, that's about it. This is one very simple camera lens. It doesn't come with a hood, it doesn't have image stabilization, and its filter size is 52mm wide. The lens is inexpensive, but still stylish and simple and enjoyable to use. For the price you're paying though, I do wish it had a metal lens mount. Anyway, let's see about image quality. Traditionally here, I start with the results on a full frame camera, and in this case, my first test is with a Nikon Z7 with its 45 megapixel sensor. In-camera corrections are turned on. In the middle of the image, right away, we see excellent sharpness and contrast. Tons of detail is being captured here. The image corners still see lots of detail being captured too, which is great, although contrast is a lot more hazy here than it was back in the middle. Stop down to f4 for a big improvement in contrast though. f5.6 looks about the same, although at f8 there seems to be just a minuscule improvement in sharpness. The lens stays this sharp down to f16, where just a little softness begins to creep in from the effects of diffraction. Overall though, as you can see, it's a very good performance on a full frame camera. You should stop down to f4 though if you want the best possible contrast in the image corners. Okay, let's try the lens on an aps-c camera now, and appropriately enough, I'll be testing it out here on a Nikon ZFC, which Nikon also loaned to me for a couple of weeks. It has a 20 megapixel aps-c or DX sized sensor, so not too demanding. Anyway, at f2.8, I'm pleased to say that, again, the lens is perfectly sharp in the middle with good contrast, and the corner image quality virtually as sharp. Nice. Stopping down to f4 brings about the most tiny improvement in the corners imaginable. The lens stays this sharp down to f11, where a little softness from diffraction emerges, and at f16, as you'd expect, the image gets noticeably soft. Still, if you bought your Nikon ZFC or any other Nikon DX camera with this as your kit lens, safe to say you won't be disappointed. It's great. Alright, let's turn off those in-camera corrections and take a look at distortion and vignetting on a full-frame camera. Strangely, Nikon chose to force distortion correction on in your camera with this lens, and that's usually a sign that a lens's raw distortion characteristic is horrifying. However, that turns out not to be the case. As you can see here, the lens, without any corrections, only projects a moderate barrel distortion here. Vignetting, or corner darkness, is rather strong at f2.8, but stop the aperture down to f4 or f5.6 for that to largely go away. Let's look at close-up image quality now. The lens can focus as closely as 20 centimeters to your subject, which is fantastic really. Less encouraging is the close-up image quality at f2.8, which is very ghostly and soft. Stop down to f4 for a huge improvement in contrast though, and f5.6 looks very good again. So if you are shooting up close, stop down a little. Let's see how well the lens works against bright lights. As expected, for a small, simple lens, there are no real issues here, which is just as well, as the lens doesn't come with a hood. Contrast remains high, flaring remains low. And finally, bokeh. Any 28mm f2.8 lens is hardly going to be a portrait photographer's first choice, although if you do get in close to your subject at f2.8, you can get some out of focus backgrounds here, particularly if you're using a full frame camera, of course. The quality of this lens's out of focus background is super lovely and soft in nearly all situations. No problems here whatsoever. Alright then, overall, the Nikon Z 28mm f2.8 may be a very unambitious lens in its parameters. I really wish its maximum aperture was more like f2, because as it is, it's not going to get you the most earth-shatteringly creative images, but it can still get you some very nice pictures, which are very sharp with no real optical problems, and it can do all that while looking, well, really cool. It comes recommended, and if you ask me, you would be a fool not to pay the extra $40 or whatever for the version with a cool retro design. Okay, that was the most enjoyable review of a 28mm lens I have ever put together. Something else I really enjoy is putting together exclusive videos and content for my generous subscribers over on Patreon. Thank you for your support, and if you'd like to find out more about how you can help keep these lens reviews trucking on, then check out the link to my Patreon in the description below. Ciao for now.